Good evening, and welcome back to the Poe Museum. As you can imagine, we have a lot of collections of Edgar Allan Poe's works here, from annotated editions, translated editions, illustrated editions. We even have a gift shop carrying more editions of Poe's works, which you can buy right now at our online store at poemuseum.org. But tonight, I'm going to show you a very special collection of Poe's works that might just have belonged to a murderer. And that'll be the subject of tonight's installment of the Curator's Crypt. This is Volume 2 and Volume 3 of the works of the late Edgar Allan Poe. Published in 1850, within a year of Edgar Allan Poe's death, this was the first collection of Poe's works published after his death. It was edited by his literary executor and worst enemy, Rufus W. Griswold. It even contains a biography of Poe written by Griswold, just smearing him, just saying what a horrible person he was. So these are already pretty important pieces in the history of Poe's works. This was the first time Poe's works had been collected from all the magazines and newspapers where they'd been originally published and combined into one uniform set. It ended up being 4 volumes in all. But that's not why this is special. These books came to the museum in 1929 from Elva P. Barney. You probably don't recognize that name. She's the youngest sister of Marie Louise Shue, who is the inspiration for Poe's poems To Marie Louise, To MLS, and The Beloved Physician. She's also said to have been present and helped inspire Poe's poem The Bells. And right there, this belonged to Dr. Lowry Barney, who's Marie Louise Shue's father. But the inscription beneath it says, presented to Lowry Barney, M.D. by Mrs. Clem, October 1850. That's Poe's mother-in-law. So Poe's mother-in-law, the subject of his poem To My Mother, is the one who gave this book to Dr. Barney. And that's not her handwriting there. That's her handwriting right up there where she dedicates the book to him. Once we look in the table of contents, I mentioned this is Volume 2, so Volume 1 would have been the tales, Volume 2 was poems and miscellanies. And let's check out the table of contents. Right there in Marie Louise Shue's handwriting, she pointed out this poem right here on page 19. She marked that. It just says, to blank blank. And she says, that poem, that's about me. So she wrote her name. Marie Louise Shue, published 1848 in the Columbian Magazine. So she wants everybody to know that's the poem about her. Why is her name not on it? Because at the time he wrote it, she was still married to Joel Shue. And in fact, let's take a look at that poem back here. This is the published version here. So once again, she's written Marie Louise Shue right there, so you know who it's for. But comparing this with the original manuscript, it's missing about 5 lines. And it picks up after the deleted part right here. The pen falls powerless from my shivering hand. But it doesn't explain why his hand's shivering. The deleted part talks about the palpitating passion that's overflowing him, and definitely stuff he couldn't publish about a married woman at the time, so he needed to cut that part out. And would this have been a big deal to her if it had been published? Yes. If he published those lines, she might have destroyed the poem. In one case, he wrote a poem for her called The Beloved Physician, and she was so scandalized by what it said that she actually bought the manuscript back from him so he couldn't publish it, and she burned the poem. so it's missing forever. So this book would have been given by Poe's mother-in-law to Marie Louise Schu's father. And this is about October 1850 is when it's dated. And throughout 1850 until about 1852, Poe's mother-in-law was living with the Schus. She was sort of in and out of their house. But something else happened right about 1850. Marie Louise Schu divorced her first husband, Joel Schu, and she quickly remarried. The second husband was a Roland Houghton, and they had a son. She was pregnant by 1849. The son was born actually before she divorced the first husband, and she said that Houghton was the father, but she named him Henry Chapin Schu. And this is a book that originally belonged to Henry Chapin. He lived with the Schus, and some people think that Henry Schu is actually Henry Chapin's son. So at some point, Marie Louise got this book from Henry Chapin, and she gave it to her father, and she wrote right here, presented to Lowry Barney by his daughter, Mrs. M.L. Houghton. So that's her married name. And both of these books passed on to her youngest daughter, who was still alive when the Poe Museum opened. And she's the one who sent these to the Poe Museum. Another thing about that Henry Schu, Marie Louise Schu Houghton might have murdered his wife. They can't prove it. She was actually on trial for her murder. Apparently, her daughter-in-law wrote to her family and said that if anything happens to me, my mother-in-law killed me. So after the daughter-in-law died, Marie Louise Schu had her quickly buried, didn't have a death certificate, didn't go through the proper protocols. So people thought it was pretty suspicious, and she actually went on trial, but they acquitted her. Does it mean she didn't murder her? Probably, but I guess we'll never know, because she died within a year of that trial, and she never confessed. So that puts a very Poe-esque slant on this copy of Poe's works. So have you read the poem To Marie Louise? What did you think about it? If not, read it now, then write down in the comments what you thought. And until next time, if you'd like to help us preserve precious Poe pieces like these, why not contribute to the Poe Museum or become a member at poemuseum.org. Or buy your own collection of Poe's works, also at poemuseum.org. So thanks for joining us, and I leave you with more gratuitous footage of the Poe Museum cats doing cat stuff.